Hey critics, today's video is just a random surprise drop of some thoughts that I'm having about the recent death or killing of the United Health Care CEO, Brian Thompson, and the fact that this is an ongoing investigation right now. The killer is still out there at loose as I am recording this right now. That may or may not change by the end of the day, and really has nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about today with this. I've been really watching with some degree of interest the overwhelming responses all over social media platforms, whichever one you're on or looking at, talking about or what's the word? Cheering on the assassination of this man. From his as the assumed reason for the killing is that this is the man who was in charge of one of the largest health care insurers, networks, insurance providers in the world, United Healthcare, UHC. And apparently what's coming out from numerous comments from people is how this company has a 30%, 20%, some various amount of larger denials or questions about the claims that are made, denying them. That there's an extraordinary amount, an extraordinary amount of denials from this company by policy, by their company dogma or whatever, as to how they go about approving healthcare claims. And I am going to be the last person who is going to sit here and defend the healthcare industry in the United States. But I thought that there was an opportunity here. I thought that there was an opportunity to bring up something deeper and something more general and perhaps useful and maybe, somewhat educational in this conversation, because I do want to go to the quiet part about this whole thing and talk about it. There is too much angst out there and too much revelry even out there over this killing. And I will call it an assassination because there doesn't appear to be any other reason for this man to have been killed other than his professional position as the head of this company. And the 3 bullet casings found at the murder scene apparently had deny, defend, and depose written on them, which of course also suggests that this has everything to do with his position or role. But let's also point out that this is not a killing that was designed to solve anything. There's no demands. There's no list of grievances. There's no apparent motive other than, what we can assume or take away from the obvious facts. Now, what I wanted to talk about here in terms of going into the quiet part and sort of talking about it is this idea that there's this unease or this sort of hesitation to really say, well, I approve of this killing because ... even though people obviously do. There's an awful lot of people out there who are cheering and celebrating this. And I wanted to talk about the moral nuances of that position, because it's not a black and white, you're wrong or you're right kind of situation here. Maybe we should talk about that a little bit. Maybe there's an opportunity for some reflection, some looking, some observation of our society and where it's at right now. I can't speak to responses to this outside of the Western world. I have no idea what, people in China or Indonesia or India think about any of this. But I certainly have, been absorbing an awful lot of stories and attention on this on Western social media sites, Reddit, Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, etc. The concept that murder is always wrong is a morally simplistic and unrealistic point of view. And I am reading from some papers. I did make a few notes that I wanted to go over. This isn't really a script. It's just something I'm going to refer to while we're talking. We kill people all the time and justify it for many different stated reasons, some good and many not so good. There's no shortage, and never has been in all of history, going all the way back to Cain and Abel, for good reasons, good solid justifications of my tribe versus your tribe as to why it is that we should unexist or do away with your tribe, right? Or why you guys feel you should do away with my tribe. And when you dive into the morality of this, then things get interesting and complicated and difficult and really, really opinionated. Lots and lots of views and opinions about this. And every single individual has their own personal point of view based on their experience, education, upbringing, geography, language, that inform how they see the world. So there's lots and lots and lots of different opinions and ideas about this, but we can reasonably argue that there are two basic reasons why murder is okay, why the taking of a life is deemed acceptable by a group of people when one person in that group is being done away with. To prevent or stop the person from continuing to harm or kill or otherwise damage people. It's a proactive measure to stop this person from doing what they are doing. The person has, in effect, forfeited their right to life by having impeded or prevented others from their own right to life. And this sort of eye for an eye or preventative kind of action to stop more bad from happening by doing a bad thing, murder, is a understood, valid moral argument that has been accepted in the halls of academia and morality for many, many centuries. This has been reasoned out and thought about, and I'm not saying anything new or different here today, but I am putting it in some plain English, because when you try to delve into the subject of ethics and knowledge and the nature of how we do our decision making and this kind of thing, you are quickly surrounded by vocabulary and concepts that are seemingly purposefully confusing. It seems like this has been made very opaque, very difficult to understand, that there's a lot of language around the topic of morality that if you don't pay the piper of learning all that language and having to invest your time in having to figure all this stuff out, all the various ethical systems in place and theories and thoughts and ideas and philosophy about this over all the years, if you don't learn all the labels and do all the work on that, then it can seem very imposing and very difficult to understand and very confusing. I find that to be the case, at least. I don't know if any of you guys ever tried to dive into this topic, with any real interest, but it seems purposefully confusing. And so I thought I would do this video today to kind of offer some of these ideas without all the confusing labels and nonsense that tends to go along with these conversations. I'm not saying that terminology isn't important or that we shouldn't be clear about our ideas, but it makes it formidable or almost impossible for a regular layperson who's not steeped in this to try to engage with these deeper thoughts and ideas. And I don't like that. So that's why I'm a little critical of all that language. I'm not critical of the people who practice it. I understand it's a deep subject and something that deserves a lot of investment. But it does, like I said, it kind of gets in the way. So you have this reason to prevent or stop the person from continuing to harm or kill or otherwise damage people. The other thing you have, the other reason, is killing this one person would prevent or impede a substantial amount of violence that would happen if the person weren't killed. The person doesn't deserve to die, but for whatever reason, killing them will stop or prevent more death from happening. Now, an example of this, a moral argument you could make in this direction is, let's say, and this is a true story, by the way, is let's say that you were on a boat and the boat sank, and you were on a lifeboat with about 3 or 4 other people, 5 other people, any number of people, and you're all starving, you're all adrift out there, and we're all going to die unless one person is killed so that we can eat them. Cannibalism. This has happened. And you could try to argue an individual into this. You could just simply decide whoever the weakest is, or however the decision making, you could draw straws. And you could justify doing away with one person in that group for the greater good. This is the utilitarian argument of the greater good, greatest good for greatest number. It's not an inherently bad or irrational idea at all. But it depends a great deal on how your moral foundations work and what your morality is based on. But that would be one example of where killing someone would prevent or impede a substantial amount of violence or death, if they stayed alive. But they didn't particularly do anything that surrendered their own right to their life, right? They're not a killer, serial monster or anything like that. An additional wrinkle is that we frown upon a person being killed when he's not doing anything wrong, such as walking into a building to attend a meeting, which is what this CEO, Brian Thompson, was doing when he was shot and killed. And yet, the murder can be justified because the murderer is preventing the future acts of this target, of this victim, which are assumed by reason of the person's job or proclivities or hobbies or whatever, that this person will be responsible for more deaths or for substantial harm in the future. And that basically is the reasoning that is being implied or sort of subtextually discussed or put into memes, and all these reasons and justifications are out there for why this man was so horrible and evil and awful, that doing away with him actually was a decision made in the interests of the greater good. And here's where I wanted to go with that, right? Again, these are just thoughts I'm sharing today. I don't have some conclusion for you, and I'm not here to tell you how to think. In fact, the reason why I turned the camera on today is because I wanted to get some thinking going and get your responses to what I had to say here about this today, and just offer some food for thought as to where things are at these days. Basically, morality is about what you value and creating justifications around that value. And if the value is something other people agree is valuable, then you get agreement and people move forward and can form tribes around those values. The basic conflict in values between the American public and those who run corporations is one of morality. We see moral arguments and moral outrage 7 days a week on every social media platform about the injustices and inequities of the world, meaning often the battles or injustices that individuals or small groups experience when bumping up against the rigidity and the rules and the dogma and the systems that are created or that are part of the bigger picture, whether it's a business, company, corporation, cult, religious group, school, educational institution. Whatever the body is, it's got its rigid rules and its moral codes and its morality, and the individual bumps up against that, gets the raw deal, gets the bad deal, doesn't get what was promised to them even. And what can they do? Very little. One against many, a minority against a majority. What do you do? And this is this struggle. This is the sort of anatomy of the struggle of so many of the problems and conflicts that we run into in our lives. If your morals as a company are about shareholder value and profit making, then human life doesn't really mean a whole lot. And that's a problem in our capitalist society, is that shareholder value and profits have been made the moral foundation upon which business law rests and upon which businesses conduct their affairs. So if they roll over or screw over 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 people so as to generate profits for a shareholder group of people, or for the company itself, whether it's a publicly traded company or not, whether the profit motive is the thing that drives your morality, if that's the basic value around which you're deciding good and bad and right and wrong, then the decision making is clearly defined by that profit motive. I believe this is well understood, but needs to be said out loud. Because when it comes to the moral argument, you have to realize that when you're dealing with companies or with institutions, their morality is not informed by the morality of the individual. There's my survival as an individual is what drives my morality. The moral center of most human groups of that are based around the humanity of the group, not a profit motive or a company that's producing a product. When you get to the human groups, then the moral values, the proletariat, so to speak, right? The moral values of the proletariat revolve around their own personal lives and survival. And these things in tough times like now, these are polar opposite moral foundations, is I think the point I'm trying to get to, right? It's a pretty simple point, but it's an important one to understand, because in a profit motive situation or in a shareholder situation, what is defined as good is anything that profits them. And if that means you got to roll over 1,000 people in order to generate the profits that are necessary to increase the portfolio of the shareholders, that's a good thing to do. And the purity of that really needs to be understood as the heart and soul of what drives American business, and why we are so conflicted with business, because there's an apparency that business is supposed to improve the lot of the individual through products and services or through employment, gainful employment. We're supposed to be better off, and things are supposed to be better for us if these companies are profiting and succeeding. But that's not always true. And the more time has passed that we're in this system, the more divergence there has been between these motives, these moral foundations. And when it's as basic as moral foundations, when the very heart and soul of a company is profit, 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 shareholder, 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 and the human factor is no longer part of that equation, it's no longer important that employees be paid a living wage, for example. That's not in the business, in best interests of the business. So they don't do it. And this is the core reason why American businesses, or businesses all over the world, for that matter, screw their own employees over, because employees are a dime a dozen. Look at how many billions of people are in the world. I can just find another person who will slot in. I can find, after 20, 30 years of gainful employment for this one individual, well, we'll fire him before we have to, give him a pension. And we'll just go find some young schmuck who doesn't know anything and train them up and employ them for the next 20 or 30 years, and rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat. And this has become good business practice in the United States. I don't know about other countries, but I know for sure in the United States, this is the attitude. Systems being what they're being and people being what they are, this sort of imbalance of values has consequences. And we are seeing the consequences of that so starkly now that I thought it worth commenting on. There are very, very few people in the public social media world who have an ounce of compassion or care for the death of this man, for the murder of this man. They see this very much through the lens of, this was an act that was done in retaliation for past evil deeds that the company itself engaged in as a system, and this man being a figurehead and symbol of that system. This was retaliatory and morally justified by the prevention or attempt to prevent future damage from this company, right? And I will leave it up to other experts as to just how damaging this company is, but I do personally believe and have experienced myself the terrors and horrors of the American healthcare system. I don't think I am speaking Martian to anybody who's watching this right now. I think anybody who is ever tangled with a hospital bill or an emergency, operation or situation that you needed help with, or you were going to literally die or have your quality of life seriously impacted, and then you run into our healthcare system and how absolutely draconian and bureaucratic and horrible and punitive it can be, and how arbitrary the decision-making process of insurance companies are, where they believe that they get to practice medicine and tell the doctors what the doctor can and can't order or can and can't do. And if you get the numbers or the codes wrong, then it's another week or 2 or 3 or 4 of trying to sort all that out so you can get the care that you need. This is the American healthcare system as it stands today. And there are even entire TV shows that have been built up around the core principle or conflict in our society of healthcare versus the individual. Shows like Breaking Bad would not exist in any other country in this world than the United States because of the way our healthcare system is designed to hurt the individual, not help them. A broad statement, and probably an unfair one to the amount of good that our healthcare system does do to people. But at times of strained, stressful economic hardship and a nation that is plagued with healthcare problems, from obesity to heart care issues to neurodivergent issues to mental health crises that we are experiencing right now. The idea that healthcare is easy to get, easy to maintain, not expensive, they're not ripping you off. These are ideas that have long since, those ships have long since sailed. Our healthcare system is the biggest rolling disaster that you could possibly imagine. And there is no one individual who is responsible for this. There's no one company who is responsible for this. And even our government, as weighty and bureaucratic and insane as it is, even it cannot be held ultimately responsible for this. There is no one cause. There is a panoply of a galaxy of reasons for this. But at the end of the day, here we are. And I've already gone on much longer than I intended to today, so I just wanted to throw these ideas out there that it's understandable why things like this would happen. I think that needs to be said out loud and acknowledged for the truth that it is. And I want to say that I personally am not in a state or place mentally where I think it's okay to just walk up to somebody and shoot them and kill them on the street for pretty much any reason. I don't think that that's the way we should conduct ourselves in our society. But I also understand that in many people's minds these days, that ship has sailed too. And that's kind of where we're at system-wise, system-wide. And it's never been more obvious than it is now how troubling that is for the state of things in our country. And that's kind of what I wanted to say, is that this is troubling, and it's a huge, huge red flag for where things could go. I guess we'll see what happens with this particular individual. I guess we'll see what happens with this particular company. But I guarantee you that what is not going to happen as a result of this is that UHC is going to have some kind of wake-up call and realize that they have been gouging and cheating and lying and denying people services and ripping them off of their insurance money. That's not what's going to happen as a result of this. That's not how the change we want to see is enacted. So you can be morally right and still be wrong in terms of how to go about solving the problems that we are faced with, right? And that's something to think about here too, because moral justification can be emotionally pleasing in the moment and be perfectly rational and still maybe not be the right answer in the longer term picture. And that's sort of the anatomy of the conflict here that we're facing right now. And maybe all this is super, super obvious and I didn't need to make this video today, but I had thoughts and I wanted to share them, and there you go. Thanks for coming around and watching me blabber on about this. And I look forward to your comments about what I had to say here. I am keen to hear your feedback and ideas about this yourself. Thanks.